Hi, welcome back to my class, Cross-Cultural Understanding. And today is the chapter 9 for us to discuss about, right now is about the intercultural transitions from language and culture shock to adaptations. With me, Andreas Yulianto from Jakarta International University, Indonesia. Let's start our class with the learning objectives. There are 7 learning objectives which are prepared in this class, and it is expected at the end of this class, students or everyone is able to identify and describe types of time and dimensions of boundary crosses. Second, describe full patterns of acculturations and immigrants. Third, identify factors that facilitate or hinder acculturations and second language socializations. Fourth, define transition shock and identify 5 types of transition shock. Yeah? And the fifth, describe the causes and symptoms of language and culture shock. Sixth, describe the core elements in the integrative communication theory of cross-cultural adaptations. And the last, discuss the role of language in cross-cultural adjustment and adaptations. Well, let's begin with the idea from James M. Messenger, 1907, quoted in Safir and Savire, 1982, as cited in Jane Jackson's 2014. If you reject the food, ignore the customs, fear the religion, and avoid the people, you might better stay home. Yeah, we are regularly exposed and we meet with many people around us. If we are not ready with the situation, yeah, you might better stay home. If you are afraid, if you are reject the food, ignore the customs, fear the different religion, and also avoid different people, better you stay at home. That's absolutely nice quote. Yeah. All right, the introductions of this class is the idea of each year, millions of people cross borders to study, work, perform military duties, represent their government, conduct business, do volunteer work, take part in the peace missions, or engage in tourism. The idea is that in this globalization era where we can use very sophisticated transportations and many other modern technologies, we can go abroad very easily. We have a lot of purposes and we decide to go outside of our country to do many things. So what happens if we go to a country? What will be happening there? That is what we are going to discuss in this chapter. Well, let's discuss with the types and dimensions of boundary crossers. In the process, newcomers may be exposed to unfamiliar language or dialects, values, norms, beliefs, and behavior. And the question is, are they able to manage or to adapt their situations or not? There are many things that can influence how well some people, some newcomers to adapt in the situations. And now it is also related with that. That is the types and the dimensions of boundary crosses. Voluntary and involuntary, it is one of the types and dimensions of why we want to cross the boundary. Uh, we want to go outside of the country. All over the world, more and more people are on the move. Yeah, they are living behind the familiarity and their comfort zone in their environment. And among these boundary crossers, we may find we may find tourists, students, exchange student sojourners, business people, expatriate workers, and so on. Yeah, and yeah, they come to another country with their own purposes. Yeah, and voluntary and involuntary here, it is the motives of people why they go to their country. Nowadays, there are situations where they have to go to another country voluntarily and involuntarily. People venture abroad with diverse motives. Yeah, for adventure, pleasure, work, economic, family unifications, a better quality of life, and so on. Right? In the previous chapter, some individuals or groups opt to travel. Yeah, they move abroad of their own country with a free will, whereas some are compelled to do so, often because of circumstances that are well beyond their control. Whether the move is voluntary or involuntary can have a profound impact on the nature and the quality of the transitions to the new environment. Voluntary transitions is um, for those who willingly choose to travel abroad. They are willingly to go or to move to another country. In voluntary cases, one makes contact with another, driven by one's interest in a cultural other, such as travel, or the needs of social life, such as a trade, yeah, and those things. Typically, this category includes the tourists, travelers, or other temporary visitors. Yeah, students, sojourners, business people, expatriates, workers, immigrants, missionaries, so on and so forth. Yeah. Things we need to know, as written, as noted by the United Nations or World Tourism Organizations. Here, tourism is the social, cultural, and economic phenomenon which entails the movement of people to countries or places outside their usual environment for personal or business or professional purposes. Yeah, and the research shows that in 2011 there were 983 million international tourist arrivals worldwide, with a growth of 4.6% as compared to 940 million in 2010. Yeah, this significant growth in numbers of the tourists. Yeah, showing that tourists are the most numerous in these situations compared to other purposes. But then educations also becomes very it also rises. Yeah, the United Nations educational, scientific, and cultural organizations of UNESCO estimate that there were more than 3.6 million students being educated at the territory level outside their home country in 2010, and up from an estimate 1.7 million in 2000s. By 2025, nearly 8 million students are expected to be educated transnational. How? Tourists and students become the most numerous in the situations where people are willingly to move to other country, either for the short period or long period. Yeah. All right. The students who are studying abroad. Yeah. Some students voluntarily travel abroad to improve their second language skills and cultural understandings, of course. Others seek to enhance their subject matter knowledge and job prospects too. International education refers to the knowledge and skills resulting from conducting a portions of one's educations in another country, or more generally, international activity that occurs at any level of educations, K-12, undergraduate, graduate, or postgraduate. Probably they think that other countries is better in education, or they are challenged, or they are motivated to go abroad to study there. Because they feel that if they go abroad, they study abroad, or to have education abroad, they are familiar with new culture, they can learn new culture and new situations. And of course, they will interact intercultural, they can do intercultural interactions with people. Education abroad denotes that education that occurs outside the participant's home country. Besides study abroad, this term encompasses such international experiences as work, volunteering, non-credit internship, and directed travel, as long as these programs are driven to a significant degree by learning goals. Yeah. This typically includes such activities as classroom study, research, internship, and service learning. All right, in North America, study abroad is considered a subtype of education abroad that results in a progress toward an academic degree at students' home institutions. So they receive the educational, the knowledge, and even very short terms, such as 3 months or 2 months internship program, or research, or service learning, like this. A subtype service learning program is a subtype of field study program in which the pedagogical focus is a placement in an activity that serves the needs of community. Forum on Education Abroad 2011. There are examples like a group of American university students may participate in a semester-long service learning project in Guatemala, in which they work with a homeless tutorial students, volunteer in orphanage, or assist human rights workers under the supervision of faculty members. All right, there are many purposes why they go abroad. And Service learning is also one of them. In a war country, in an area that they are in a war, there are a lot of victims that needs help from other countries. And some people, they do this voluntarily. They go there to donate or to give a help in the medical things. Yeah, that is the service learning. Well, individuals may also choose to work abroad temporarily. Other migrates to another country to seek a better life, earn money, pursue more educational, professional, and social opportunities for themselves and their families. Join family members who have immigrated earlier. Yeah, immigrants are very diverse. And the majority voluntarily their new life displayed level of education and linguistic competence. The majority voluntarily moved to a country where host nations speak a different language and have customs, worldviews, and habits that differ from what they are accustomed, yeah, to their country of origin. Well, after the voluntary, now we discuss the involuntary transitions. Here, not all migrations is voluntary. For a variety of reasons, people or a groups of people may become involuntary migrants. They may be compelled to move to a different region or country where they have reasons why they are forcefully to go there. In voluntary cases, intercultural contexts are often driven by rather negative elements such as power struggles within different ethnic or cultural groups, for example, war, or a powerful group's political, economic, ideological, and cultural impositions and dominations of the less powerful others such as colonializations. In the previous chapter, migrations is sometimes forced on individuals or a group, such as refugees. At the beginning of 2011, there were approximately 10.5 million refugees under the auspices of the UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. More than half were in Asia and around 20% in Africa. Yeah. 4.8 million Palestinian refugees were also in camps overseen by the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, an organization that was established in 1949 to care for displaced Palestinians. Due to the humanitarian crisis and unstable political situations, the number of refugees is escalating and many are not included in the UNHCR statistics. And you know that refugees and asylum seekers involuntarily and often quite suddenly find themselves in an alien environment. Yeah, they go to another country in order to escape wars, abuse, political, sexual, religion, and other persecutions. Yeah. The terms refugees here refers to a person who has been granted protections in a country outside his or her homeland. An asylum seeker is seeking protections as a refugee and is waiting for his or her claim to be assessed by a country that has signed the Geneva Conventions on Refugees, UNESCO. It is useful if successful permissions may be granted to settle in the new country for the refugee and asylum seeker. Those who are denied the right of abode even after multiple appeals are usually repatriated or sent to another country. The review process can be very protracted and the outcome uncertain. Not surprisingly, unlike voluntary migrants, refugees may have more conflicted emotions about being in a foreign land and face more stress, of course, and also uncertainty about what lies ahead. All right. Instead of carefully planning their new life abroad, some have fled their home country without knowing it. They may have entered a refugee camp without knowing if when or where they will be relocated. So their life is full of uncertainty. Yeah. While some migrants voluntarily cross borders and return home, which may never be possible. They voluntarily cross borders and come into contact with people from the host culture, and some refugees do not get it. All of these elements play a role in the transitions to a new life, new way of life. Yeah. Temporary. Temporary, we talk about the sojourn. It refers to the period of time spent living in a cultural setting different from one owns. When they arrive in the new environment, they already plan to return to their home country or go on to another destinations at some point. Yeah, different from the refugees or asylum seekers. The term sojourner includes the many subcategories such as tourists, international students, business executive, and other expatriates workers. Sojourners are individuals who are in a new environment temporarily. They go to another country for some short period of time. Yeah, tourists and study and yeah, something like that they can do in a very short time, in a several days, months, or years. Tourists are the most numerous group of sojourners. They usually stay abroad for only a short time, only few days, weeks, or months, yeah, to sightsee, to enjoy holiday, to meet new people or to meet their friends. Yeah. Several subgroups of tourists have focused aims, such as eco-tourists. Yeah, so they travel to explore the nature, and some of them just travelers. They just extend the period and seek out interactions with local people. Second one is the expatriates. Expatriates are individuals who are engaged in employment abroad. For example, Siaval teachers from Australia in Malaysia American bankers who work for multinational firm in Tokyo, British surveyors employed in Libya. Yeah, expatriates workers may or may not be accompanied by family members, and the amount of the contact they have with host nationals varies considerably. Some expatriates reside and work in a compound that is segregated from the local populations. Yeah. In the previous meeting, we talked about the globalizations. More and more institutions of higher education have officially or informally adopted an internationalization policy. This international policy has created more opportunities for young people and teachers to travel abroad. Yeah. Now let's talk the permanent one. The previous one is the temporary, so now the permanent one. Whereas sojourners are only temporary in the host or new environment, immigrants and refugees may settle in a country that is not their place. But as I told you, that they stay there with full of uncertainty. They don't know when and where they have to go. Yeah, some become permanent resident. Some people become permanent residents, and they can also gain new citizenship in their new country. While some immigrants are able to hold dual or multiple citizenships, others are required to renounce their original citizenships if they officially change their nationality. Immigration is not a new phenomenon, but the number of people who are leaving their home country to permanently reside in another has never been greater. Yeah, immigration uh, is it's happened since a long time. They move from one place to another place, yeah, to another country. All right, now the multi-dimensional nature of boundary crosses. To understand the process and the impact of intercultural transitions, we must consider first the motivations for boundary crossings. The second one, the durations of the stay. The third one, the nature of the move. And the fourth, the frequency of crossings. Yeah. The motivations for boundary crossing, we can see whether they are forced or voluntary. And the duration of the stay, it is a short term or long term. And the nature of the move, it is for the tourist, study, or work. Or the frequency of the frequency of crossings, whether it is habitual crossings or it is their first timers. Yeah, to understand the process and the impact of intercultural transitions, we must consider these 4 points. We can see how difficult, how hard the situations for the newcomers. It can be seen from these 4 ideas. Yeah. Differences in status, power, size of the group, rights, and the resources, such as economic, political, social, so on and so forth. Those things influence how newcomers perceive and interact in the new environment. All right. Individual characteristics or attributes such as attitudes, motives, values, personalities, and abilities like English proficiency or other language proficiency, also play a role in determining how newcomers respond to their new environment. Yeah. Individuals such as students, sojourners, expatriates may also change their status from temporary sojourners to permanent uh, residents. For example, the international exchange students may remain abroad to work after their studies are. Yeah, so they go initially with the purpose is just for a short time to study there, but then when they feel comfortable with the situations and they need more education, for example, they decide to work or to get married with local people, and they gain the new citizenship. The life-changing decisions will impact on their perceptions of their adopted land, as well as their intercultural relationships and self-identities. Transitions to a new culture, long-term and short-term adaptations. Long-term adaptations, immigrants and other settlers. Variations in attitudes toward linguistic and cultural differences. The quality and degree of contact with people in host environment. Second language and culture learning strategies. Differences in desire or ability to settlers to fit into the new environment. Variations in the attitudes of host nationals toward new comers. Long-term adaptations, immigrants and other settlers. For many decades, social psychologists, communication specialists, linguists, and other scholars, yeah, they studied the adaptations of immigrants and refugees who settle in a new cultural environments, more either voluntarily or due to circumstances beyond their control. Yeah. All right. Acculturations and second language socializations. Well, in the previous chapter, we are exposed, we learn about the enculturations. Yeah, enculturation is the process where individuals acquire the new the knowledge, skills, attitudes, values that is necessary to become functioning members of their culture. Now, acculturations here is the term. Yeah, is the term used to refer to the changes in a cultural group or individuals as a result of contact with another cultural group. It refers to the change that take place, yeah, after contact between individuals or group with different cultural background. Yeah. Second language socializations refers to the process by which novices and unfamiliar linguistic and cultural context gain intercultural communicative competence by acquiring linguistic conventions, socio-pragmatic norms, cultural script, and other behaviors that are associated with a new culture. Closely tied to acculturations. Second language socializations bring us to do the acculturations. When we interact with people, when we are exposed to new languages from other peoples, then we gradually adapt and acquire their languages. Yeah, and we become the we become we are able to use the languages, the linguistic conventions, the socio-pragmatic norms, cultural script, and other behaviors that are associated with the new culture. Cultural maintenance. Cultural maintenance refers to the effort to sustain elements of one's culture. Or heritage by preserving core values, traditions, ways of being, especially when faced with pressure to adopt a more dominant culture as the majority culture. Cultural maintenance is our effort to maintain the elements of our culture, our heritage. So we still insist to use our traditions, our ways of being, even in new situations. Yeah. So this is the acculturation's patterns. And language maintenance, the preservations of language variety in a context where there is a considerable pressures for speakers to shift toward the more prestigious or politically dominant language. The ways that individuals and ethno-cultural groups respond to the process of acculturation are the acculturation strategies. Here, John Berry, 1974, 1977, and 2003, define or describe the assimilations and integrations as the acculturation strategies. Assimilations occurs when individuals do not retain their original cultural identity and link to their heritage or culture. Instead, they seek close interactions with the host culture and adopt the cultural values, norms, and traditions of the new society. People who assimilate into the new culture, they are up to focus on mastering, on learning a new language or local language or host language. Yeah, and they rarely use their first language. When they have children, they teach their children using their second language. Yeah. So their children grow up knowing very little about their heritage and their first language of their parents or grandparents. Well, the integrations here occurs when people take steps to maintain their cultural heritage and original cultural identity while developing harmonious relationships with other cultures such as host nations. So in the integrations, it is a bit different from the assimilations. Here, yeah, people still use their first language, for example, and they also learn new language. In countries that have a large multilingual and multicultural populations, immigrants may continue to use their first language at home and among their members of ethnic, yeah, and with their other immigrants, yeah, and people from other countries too, other cultures too. People who adopt this strategy aim to integrate into the new society, although they take on some characteristics of the host culture. Here, they also still they retain elements of their original culture that they value. Yeah. Another acculturation strategies, that is separations or segregations. where it refers to the acculturation strategy in which the individuals strive to maintain their cultural heritage and avoid participations in the larger society of their new country. At the beginning of this uh, discussions, I already showed you if you are afraid or if you are not, if you don't want to receive new life, new environment, better you stay home. Here, separations, they strive to maintain their cultural heritage and they strictly avoid participations in the larger society of their new country. They do not wish to be closely linked to the host culture, and they may resist, or at least they may not invest in learning the dominant language of the community. Most of their time is spent interacting in their first language with people from their ethnic groups. Yeah, and marginalizations is the other strategy. It refers to the acculturation strategy in which people do not nurture their cultural heritage and first language and resist interacting with people in a larger society. Marginalized and isolated individuals reject both the new and the old culture. They display little or even they have no interest in maintaining the identity of their own culture group. They don't make any effort to develop a cultural identity to the dominant culture. This form of acculturation tends to be characterized by isolations and confusion. Now let's learn the transitioning to a new culture, long-term and short-term adaptations. Short-term adaptations for the sojourners. Most investigations of short-term sojourners, for example, international exchange students, expatriates, have focused on the need to quickly adjust to their new environment. So in practical ways, they help people adjust and optimize their temporary stay abroad by learning the host language, communicating in a culturally appropriate ways with host national, coping with culture difference. Yeah, so because they know, they are aware that they only for a short time, so they have to do the short-term adaptations. So they have to quickly adapt or adjust to their new environment. Yeah, the next sessions focused on the challenge that they may face before, during, and after their stay abroad. So the types of transition shock. Transition shock is a broad construct which refers to the state of loss, disorientations, and identify confusions that can occur when we enter a new situation, job, relationship, or physical locations and find ourselves confronted with the strain of adjusting to the unfamiliar, such as novel perspective, different roles. Moving from secondary school to university, or from one's family to another family, are the examples of the situations. They may feel the transition shock. Starting a new job or becoming a single after a long-term romance. Yeah. And this is also the life transitions that people may experience. Even such as these situations can have an emotional, psychological, behavioral, and cognitive impact. Yeah. Here are several subcategories of the transition shock. The first is culture shock. Culture shock is really common in a new situation, in a new life, in a new environment. When sojourners comes or when we cross borders, we travel with uh, our own language, values, beliefs, and habits that we develop in our home country. We develop it through our, of course, our social, through our from our process of enculturations. Yeah, and in a previous chapter, we also talk about the enculturations where we learn something new from media, from religious figure, from many aspects. And now, when we are in a different country, in a different situations, and we are um, meeting with people who are different from us, culture shock happens. Yeah, in an unfamiliar linguistic, physical, and social environment, it is quite common to experience stress and confusions when we are confronted with new ideas and behaviors. This experience can be very frustrating and, unsettling, yeah, for everyone who go abroad. And yeah, it can really impact on the quality of the lasting impact of our stay abroad. The second one is the role shock. Role shock here, when we enter new unfamiliar situations, we are apt to be exposed to roles and responsibilities that differs from what we are used to in our hometown, in our home environments. For examples, let's say when we encounter different expectations for the behavior of males and females in a particular context. In an unfamiliar country, students may be surprised also to discover that, let's say, the roles of teachers and the learners, where maybe in our country, uh, the discussion is initiated by the teachers and students is waiting till their turn to speak out. But then in another country, for example, the initiations of the discussions come from students. Yeah, in a new job, for example, in an unfamiliar country, it can be very stressful to discover that the relationship between employer and employee is much more formal, or maybe in some country is less formal. So it's very different. Yeah. There's another subcategory is the language shock. Boundary crossing frequently involves exposure to a language that is not one's mother. Not having enough language skills, linguistic competence, and other things needed to communicate. Yeah, it can be very frustrating. If we speak the same first language as host national, differences in accents, cultural script, norms of politeness, dialects, vocabulary slang can impede communications. Yeah. Even we learn their language, but sometimes their non-verbal behaviors is also important to be learned. Language and culture shock can lead to temporary disorientations and discomfort in unfamiliar surroundings. The last one is identity or self shock. What happened here? Crossing borders there is a benefit of this. It can also, we can also raise awareness, our awareness of one sense of self, and even challenge self-identities that have long been taken for granted. We try to make a sense of our new environment and communicate who we are. We are sometimes dismayed to discover that we are not perceived as we would like. Communicating one's preferred identities through a second language can be very much frustrating, and it can also easily be misunderstood. And of course, with exposure to new ways of being, newcomers may also experience some confusions about who they are and how they fit into the world around them. That is the categories of transitions. Now the language and culture shock. What is culture shock? Culture shock is a set of emotional reactions to the loss of perceptual reinforcements from one's own culture to new culture. Cultural stimuli which have little or no meaning and tend to the misunderstanding of new and diverse experience. Culture shock is also very common here. We experience all these things when we are in a new situations. Same thing as the role shock. Role shock is characterized by lack of knowledge and confusion about the norms of behavior in a new culture, such as rules of politeness, business etiquette, which are different from in our hometown, home country, home environment with the youth. And also the same things as the language shock. Language shocks refers to the challenge of understanding and communicating in a second language in an unfamiliar environment. So it is a challenge for us to communicate, to understand new language, yeah, and identity or self-shock. The intrusions of inconsistent, conflicting self-image, which can involve loss of communication competence, distorted self-reflections in the responses of the others, and the challenge of changing identity-bound behaviors. Language and culture shock. Now let's learn the causes of language and culture shock. Moving from one linguistic and cultural environment to new situations, new environment, of course, it can cause the stress, anxiety, and confusion. What are the main sources of the language and culture shock? Now let's see this. Unrealistic, romantic expectations. Now let's learn from the Elsa, a student sojourner. She made this following comments in her diary as she traveled from Asia to England. Yeah, during the flight, the images, or I should say my imaginations about what England is like and how British people look like, kept lingering in my mind. In my opinion, Britain is quite a traditional, old-fashioned country. People there are all with perfect property. Gentlemen and ladies in nice suits and gowns are the most outstanding image that first come to my mind whenever I think of England. A few weeks later, she was much less enthusiastic when she wrote. I used to think that all English were polite and gentle. Some are gentlemen, but a lot are not. From reading books, I thought that all British people are very cultured, going to the theater and reading literature, but I was too naive. That makes me a little bit disappointed as I expected that the whole country was very cultured. This is the unrealistic and romantic expectation. If we have decided to move to a new environment, we have an expectations of uh, about a particular country that we are going to. And of course, it can be quite shock to discover that it is not like what we dream. Yeah, it is very different from our expectation. So it's something like what we read from the book, what we watch from the TV, or what we search from Google. When we stay in directly in that country, then we feel something different. Of course, it is the reasons why we experience language and culture shock. Now, the other causes of language and culture shock is the inadequate preparations, abrupt change, lack of familiarity with signs and symbols, loss, sensory overload, unfamiliar ways of being, feeling trapped, ambiguity and uncertainty, lack of social and emotional support, standing out, discriminations of perceptions of discriminations, language and shock, language fatigue, miscommunications, conflict in values, change in status or positioning. All right. Inadequate preparations, very crucial here. We have to search, we have to collect information before we go to other country. If we experience language and culture shock, it may come as a surprise if when the first time we arrive in a country, we may not have considered language and culture learning strategies and other informations about country when we are inadequate preparations. Without adequate preparations and limited understanding of culture shock, we may be ill-equipped psychologically to deal with the natural ups and downs of adjustments. Abrupt change. Nowadays, with advanced transportations, we can easily travel from our home environment to distant land in a matter of hours only. In our journey, we may cross several time zones and arrive in a place with very different climate as well as many unfamiliar practices such as cultural, religious, political, social activities. And this can be a shock to one's system. Lack of familiarity with signs and symbols. In our home environment, we are surrounded by physical and social signs that, of course, help us to make sense of our world and enable us to function in everyday life. But then when we meet a new signs and new symbols, of course, it is very difficult and frustrating. Our inability to comprehend these signs and symbols can induce acculturative stress and loss. Actually, when we move to a new environment, we leave behind much of what is familiar to us, right? Some people experience intense feelings of grief and loss as they miss their first language, people, places, and other aspects such as food, expressions of courtesy, sound, smells that are dear to them in their home environment. Sensory overload. So in unfamiliar surroundings and situations, it is not unusual to feel overwhelmed and overstimulated by the multitude of new sights, sounds, and smells that we experience. Yeah, and unfamiliar ways of being in a new cultural environment. We are bound to encounter unfamiliar worldviews and ways of doing things. Yeah, we may be confronted with different ideas about what is appropriate behavior for males and females, religious practices, maybe the use of something, yeah, many things new in a new situation. The causes of language and culture shocks next is feeling trapped. For those who stay abroad for less than 3 weeks, and even tourists who are abroad for longer, know that uh, if they are really uncomfortable in the new environment, they can seek refuge in their hotel room and will soon escape to the safety and security. Feeling trapped is very uh, crucial here. Sometimes we experience when we give up to the situations, to the new things. Sojourners who are unable to cope, we may take a flight and head for home earlier than planned because they feel trapped. Next is the ambiguity and uncertainty. It can be very frustrating to discover that our usual ways of daily accomplishing daily tasks and interacting with people do not work well in the new culture. Yeah, and lack of socio-emotional support. In our hometown, maybe we have someone to help us, to support us, someone we love, who love us. But in another country, when we travel, when we are experiencing a problem, we cannot share to them as we used to do in our hometown. We can do this until we find or make new friends, yeah, to and we can develop a support system for us. Standing out in our home environment, we can easily blend in if we are visible similar to other members of the majority culture. Here, when we cross the border, we become a visible minority for the first time in our life. It can be quiet shock because we find everything is different and sometimes we are not acknowledged by people because of our difference. Even if we physically blend to a new environment, actually we can still discover that people will act or will treat us as not as different from what we expect. Our accent, nonverbal behavior, and communication styles can signal that we are a stranger. Yeah. Discriminations and perceptions of discriminations. If we have grown up in an environment where we are a member of a group, it can be a shock to enter a world in which we are the minority member with less status at all. We'll be easily to be discriminated. We experience different treatment, yeah, so on and so forth. And language shock, of course, our language, the way we speak, regarding the politeness strategy, the greetings, and so on and so forth, is quite different from other country. So it is very fundamental to have the socio-pragmatic norms or competence. So we learn the differences in the use of language, the style, language style, and so on and so forth. And also language fatigue. Interacting with people in a second language can be very exhausting, especially when we are not used to functioning in the language on a daily basis. If our proficiency is not advanced, then we may find that we need to translate oral speech in our head and then respond. Next, miscommunications. Of course, it is very common to be happen in new situations. Conflict in values, different values, yeah, and also the change in the status and positioning. As a stranger or a newcomer, we may discover that we have lost our status in Indonesia or in our home country. We are a teacher, but then in another country, maybe we are not, or we become a students. Yeah. Now, language and culture shock, the symptoms of language and culture shock. The cross-cultural psychologists, counselors, educators, and other scholars such as Arthur 2004, Bochner 2006, Gabbert 2010, Ward et al. 2001, Winkelmann 1994. This research, they suggest when you enter another culture to live, work, or study, or other things, we may experience some following symptoms: change in sleep patterns, frequent mood swings, and heightened irritability. So we be easily bothered by things that would normally not trouble you actually. Feeling vulnerable, powerless, lost, and insecure. Yeah. We feel preoccupations with our safety, constant fears about being robbed, cheated, and exploited. Yeah. Excessive worrying about one's state of physical or mental health, continuous concern about the purity of the water and food. Yeah. Unfamiliar body aches and pains and frequent illness, headaches, stomachs, aches, allergies, cold, general malaise, so on. Loss of appetite or overeating, feeling sad and lonely even when in the company of other people, homesickness, utopian, unrealistic views about your home culture and language, fear of trying new things, meeting local people, or going to unfamiliar place, feeling of inadequacy, increased consumptions of alcohol or drugs, frequent perceptions of being singled out, overlooked, or discriminated against, rising desire to interact with people just like yourself, cognitive impairment, frequently questioning your decisions to go abroad and counting the days until you return home, constantly comparing the new environment with your home culture, hostility towards members of the host culture, and frequent us versus them discourse. Resentment and lack of desire to interact with people from the host culture, yeah, loss of identity or confusions about who we are, and how we fit into the world, and refusal to learn, use the host language and interact with host nationals. These are the symptoms, language and culture shock. Degree of language and culture shock. There are some degree of language and culture shock. The quality of informations, the cultural similarity, linguistic similarity, communication style similarity, interpersonal dimension, psychological factors, social, emotional support, degree of control, geopolitical factors, agency, duration, and spatial factors. These all the influence the language and culture shock, the degree of language and culture shock. If we are very familiar with, if we, the cultural is very similar with ours, is the link with the linguistic is also similar with ours. So the degree is of the language and culture shock is little, or it's very small. Yeah. Another language and culture shock here. Positive and negative effect of language and culture shock. There are positive and negative. In Adler 1975, in the encounter with another culture, the individuals gains new experiential knowledge by coming to understand the roots of his or her own ethnocentrisms, and by gaining new perspectives and outlooks on the nature of culture. Paradoxically, the more one is capable of experiencing new and different dimensions of human diversity, the more one learns of oneself. Yeah. Early conceptions of culture shock were largely negative. But then, nowadays, however, there is a growing recognition of the positive dimensions of this phenomenon, and the focus has shifted to productive ways to manage the stress that naturally occurs as one enters and adjusts to a new environment. By getting culture shock, you are challenging yourself, surpassing your comfort zone, and becoming much more aware of your identity and of the world around you. You are building skill, of course, gaining confidence and forging relationships that surpass your former boundaries. Ultimately, you are learning what it means to be a global citizens. Wow, that is the benefit of the culture shock itself. So, are you ready for going abroad to face new situations? Yeah, culture shock leads to different levels of whole person development. Emotional intelligence and resourcefulness, interpersonal communication skills, intercultural competence, independence, maturity, and identity expansions. It is the broadened, more exclusive sense of self, the development of the global outlook. Culture shock leads a deeper level of the whole person's development. Let's say the interpersonal communication skill, the intercultural competence, our intercultural competence. So there is some improvement when we experience this culture shock. Now let's learn the U-curve adjustment model. The U-shaped model includes 4 states. The first is the honeymoon stage. It is the initial euphoria. Culture stress. Next, culture stress and shock. It is the second steps. Crisis and frustrations. And then the third one, we try to adjust. We make adjustment. So integrations or recovery. And then the fourth one, mastery, adaptations and acceptance by culturalisms. This is the U-curve adjustment models by Lisgard, 1955, as cited in James Jackson, 2014. Next, the re-entry and W curve adjustments model. All right, here the Gullahern and Gullahern 1963 maintained that returners often experience a similar period of adjustment when they return home. So they extended the U curve model by adding two stages: re-entry or reverse culture shock and socializations, the process of readjusting one's attitudes and behaviors to feel at ease in one's home environment after a period away. Yeah, so these situations, this W curve adjustment model is actually the repetitions of the U curve. So after we master certain points and then we get back to another our hometown, let's say, then we start new things and we readjust our life again and again. Yeah, this is the process of the W curve adjustments model. Stage of the culture shock and adjustments. The process honeymoon phase. It is when the first arrive in the host culture, the curve model suggests that the most we are excited and looking forward to see what happens next. Yeah, this is the early stage. Yeah, we learn from these situations by the second language sojourners soon after her arrival in the host culture. She wrote, "Waking up this morning, I could hardly believe I was in England. It was all alike a dream. A dream that came true finally. I look around my bedroom and then viewed through the window. The air was still and quiet amidst birds chatter. Everything was clear like a framed picture, with no sign of impurities of or populations which very often surrounded my living place back home. The colors of my room, the neighboring houses, the trees, and the sky were plain, fresh, and lively. A sense of satisfaction ran through my heart." It is the initial stage. So we are still excited to see what happens in the my new environment. Second one is hostility phase. Now let's learn from these situations. You feel that you are different from the people there. Your skin color, your language, and your thoughts. Everyone likes to be with people who are like them. I felt isolated and a bit depressed because they were all familiar with each other and I knew nobody. I had difficulties with communications and felt unwelcome by locals. That was far from my expectations before going on exchange. I was desperate to go home at that time. It is the situation, the second situation, the hostility phase. So now we are aware something different. We feel unaccepted, yeah, unwelcome by locals. The third one is humorous stage. I had difficulty communicating with locals in the beginning, but after many weekends, after weeks had passed, I found that they were nice people. It's just that they dared not to speak in English. Also by then, I knew more about their culture and began to like this country. True, I did experience culture shock at the beginning, but I learned to overcome it. It is the third phase, and sometimes it is termed as the reorientations and reintegrations phase, or adjustment and recovery. Yeah, with let's say initially we feel difficulties, but gradually we start enjoying the situations. Yeah, we start to look for build friendship with other international students, with other people, with your local people. Yeah, but then they still experience difficulties, even they already in this stage. And the fourth stage is the at home stage, the at home stage. From this story, we can see that look at midway through the semester, my life took a turn. By then, I'd made more friends, including some English mates, and had even begun to dream in English. I realized I'd developed a sense of belonging to Bloomsbury, my neighborhood, from the Indian restaurant to the corner shop to my residence hall. Social bonds began to form. Overcoming advertises with positivity allowed me to see more and discover more, and with the positive energy which this generates, others could feel this. Studying abroad is not easy. It is a test of the strength of your character, but if you champion it and open yourself up, it can change your life completely. So this phase is sometimes referred to as adaptations and resolutions. Yeah. So right now we can handle, we can adjust. We already adapt the situation, so we are comfortable with the new environment. Then, so here we already we enhance the self-confidence. Yeah. Sojourners in this stage may employ more culturally appropriate problem solving and conflict mediation tactics. They are more adept at coping with challenges that come their way. Re-entry or reverse culture shock. My adjustments on re-entry has been more difficult than what I experienced abroad. I'm still not fully readjusted now. The whole living schedule and sleeping times have changed. Before going on exchange, I was able to sleep very little and do a lot of things during the day. But now I find this living style is very tiring. I wish I was living the comfortable Norwegian lifestyle, but if I do, I won't have enough time to get everything done. I don't know how to cope with that. I'm still working on this, still adjusting to being back. Re-entry refers to the process of returning home after spending time abroad. And returners may experience disorientation, surprise, and confusions when they do not easily fit back into their home environment. In the beginning, those who more fully integrated into the host culture and functions well in the host language in their daily life may find it difficult, more difficult to readjust to their home culture and first language used in their daily life. They may miss their more independent lifestyle and friends made abroad and find it difficult to fit back into the rhythm of the local life. Returnee recounted this process in an interview. Now the stage is the resocialization stage. It took me some effort to get used to the local lifestyle again, as I become accustomed to the way of living in Korea. When I came back home, I had to readjust to many things. I had such a wonderful and splendid life in Korea. But when I came back, I felt, it was just so different. I have had to accept it and adapt. You have to try your best to adjust since there's no choice for you. And gradually you feel like you fit in. Now I'm in a better place in my head. I'm doing more things with my friends and I'm happy. I'm also keeping in touch with friends in Seoul through Facebook. The final phase in the model is sometimes referred to as reintegrations, the independent stage, or acceptance and understanding. In this stage, we are beginning to feel more at home and are better able to communicate effectively and appropriately with our family members, friends, and colleagues. Yeah. Now the optimizing intercultural transitions. Yeah. Prior to sojourners, research your destination, set realistic goals and expectations. Take a course in intercultural communications, like what we did right now. Practice your second language. Attend pre-sojourner orientations when available. Take advantage of online materials. So by this, we can optimizing intercultural relationship prior to sojourners. In the new environment, familiarize yourself with the local context. Be patient. Language and culture shocks are natural and adjustments takes time. True. Keep in touch with family and friends back home. Develop a routine and take care of your health. Take part in any orientation activities arranged by the host university. Join extracurricular activities and have fun. Be open to new experiences. Be adventurous. Yeah. Take the initiative to develop diverse social networks. Form friendship with host nations, international students, co-nationals. Recognize hot buttons issues, culture differences that annoy you. Find a cultural mentor and seek help when needed. Revisit and revise the goals you set prior to the surgeon. Enhance your second language skills. Take the initiative to practice the language in informal situations. Pay attention to the socio-pragmatic dimensions. Recognize the limitations of your linguistic and cultural knowledge. Limit negative thoughts and refrain from making snap judgments about cultural difference. Anticipate setbacks and preserve when you experience setbacks. Develop the habit of self-analysis and critical reflections. Consult recommended online resources. So this is also the way of optimizing intercultural transitions. Prior to returning home, begin your re-entry preparations while abroad. Say meaningful goodbyes. Take advantage of online materials that provide advice on re-entry. Set goals for your return home. And back on home soil. Share your international stories in small doses and demonstrate interest in others. Yeah. Local happening, the experiences of your friends and family members. Participate in re-entry, debriefings of or courses when available. Be patient. Refrain from making snap judgments about your home culture. Avoid shoeboxing, your international experience. Join international or second language organizations and study abroad alumni groups. Share your experience with a wider audience. Local school children, for example. Serve as a body for newcomers or volunteer to orientate students who will venture abroad. Talk with people who understand your transitions, other returning exchange students. Stay in touch with friends abroad and continue to expand and diversify your social networks. For example, make friends with incoming international exchange students. Continue to practice your second language. Yeah. And critically reflect on your international re-entry experience. Consult online resources and re-entry. Make concrete plans for further intercultural international experience. Well, if you decide to study, live, or work in an unfamiliar linguistic and cultural environment, there are steps that you can take to ease your transitions. These are the steps that you can learn and prepare for yourself. We have been coming to the end of these sessions, and we have the discussions, questions. You can discuss with your partner, your peers, your friends, yeah, to complete these situations, these discussions, and you can use the answer sheets that I have prepared. Yeah, that's it. I think for the discussions. Thank you so much for today, and I will be meeting in the next class. Thank you. And this is the notes that the chapters previously, some investigations of the international exchange experience of university students from Hong Kong and mainland China who took part in either a semester or year abroad international exchange program in one of 40 countries. This research was generously supported by the Research Grants Council for the Hong Kong Sun. So the examples provided in this chapter in today's classes also taken from the interview from the university students. So they share their ideas about the situations. That's it for today. Bye-bye.